The early afternoon sun streamed through the large glass windows of an upscale cafe in downtown Manhattan. The gentle hum of conversation and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee created a warm, inviting atmosphere. Among the patrons seated at the polished wooden tables was Barron Trump, the youngest son of former President Donald Trump. At 18 years old, Barron had grown into a tall and reserved young man, often choosing quiet moments like this to escape the relentless scrutiny that came with his family name. Barron sat at a corner table, dressed casually in a gray hoodie and jeans, with a steaming cup of cappuccino in front of him. A hardcover book rested on the table, its spine showing the title The Art of War by Sun Tzu. While the cafe buzzed with life, Barron remained engrossed in his reading, seemingly oblivious to the occasional glances from other patrons who recognized him. As he flipped a page, the cafe door swung open, and a man in his mid-40s entered. He was dressed in a rumpled suit, his expression stern as his eyes scanned the room. Spotting Barron, he paused for a moment before striding purposefully toward the corner table. Barron glanced up, his calm blue eyes meeting the man's intense gaze. "You're Barron Trump, right?" the man asked, his tone sharp. Barron nodded politely, setting his book down. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" The man's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. "Do you have any idea what your family has done to this country? Your father's policies hurt people like me, and you sit here, sipping coffee like you're above it all." The cafe grew silent as conversations halted, and all eyes turned toward the confrontation. The barista froze mid-pour, and a young couple at the next table exchanged uneasy glances. Barron remained composed, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Barron replied evenly. "But I'm just a private citizen trying to enjoy some time to myself. I'm not here to debate politics." The man's frustration only seemed to escalate. "Not here to debate? Your family put itself in the spotlight. You can't just sit there and pretend you're not part of the problem." Barron sighed quietly, setting his cappuccino aside. "I understand that my last name carries weight," he said. "And I understand that people have strong feelings about my father and his administration. But I'm an individual, not a representative of anyone else's actions. If you want to have a civil conversation, I'm willing to listen, but shouting at me won't solve anything." The man's face reddened as he opened his mouth to respond, but an older woman seated nearby interjected. "Young man," she said to Barron, her voice steady, "I think you handled that with remarkable poise. Some people just don't know how to express themselves without resorting to anger." The comment seemed to diffuse some of the tension in the room, though the man still looked agitated. Barron turned to the woman with a polite nod. "Thank you, ma'am. I believe everyone has a right to their feelings. I just wish we could discuss them more productively." The cafe's manager approached cautiously, his expression a mix of concern and resolve. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between Barron and the man. Before Barron could respond, the man threw up his hands in exasperation. "Fine. Enjoy your coffee, kid. Just remember, people like me are struggling because of your family." With that, he turned and stormed out of the cafe, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Barron exhaled slowly, picking up his book as if to resume reading. But before he could, the older woman leaned over, curiosity evident in her eyes. "Do people confront you like that often?" she asked. Barron shrugged. "Sometimes. It comes with the territory. But I've learned that reacting with anger doesn't help. It just feeds into the negativity." The woman smiled warmly. "You're wise beyond your years, young man. Don't let the world's noise drown out your own voice." Barron returned the smile, grateful for her kindness. "Thank you. That means a lot." As the cafe slowly returned to its usual rhythm, Barron couldn't help but reflect on the encounter. He was no stranger to being in the spotlight, but moments like this served as a reminder of the challenges that came with his family's notoriety. Still, he was determined to carve out his own identity, separate from the shadow of his father's legacy. Little did he know, the incident at the cafe was far from over. A young woman seated across the room had captured the entire exchange on her phone, moved by Barron's calm and thoughtful response. By the time Barron finished his coffee and left, the video had already been uploaded to social media, where it quickly began to gain traction. Within hours, the video had been shared thousands of times, sparking a wave of discussions online. Some praised Barron for his maturity, while others debated the appropriateness of confronting him in the first place. The Café incident became a trending topic, drawing attention from media outlets and commentators alike. As the video continued to circulate, it reached someone unexpected, Donald Trump himself. Sitting in his office, Trump watched the footage with a mixture of pride and concern. His youngest son had always been private, preferring to stay out of the public eye. But seeing Barron handle the confrontation with such composure reminded Trump of something he'd always believed. Strength isn't just about speaking loudly. It's about knowing when to listen. Trump picked up his phone and dialed Barron. "Hey, son," he said when Barron answered. "I just saw that video from the Café. I'm proud of how you handled yourself." Barron's voice was calm on the other end. "Thanks, Dad. It wasn't easy, but I didn't want to add to the tension." "You did the right thing," Trump replied. "Not everyone can stay calm under pressure. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Barron. Don't ever forget that." As Barron ended the call, he felt a sense of reassurance. He knew the incident would likely follow him for a while, but he was ready to face whatever came next. After all, he had learned long ago that resilience wasn't just a trait, it was a choice. As the sun dipped lower on the Manhattan skyline, the Café incident involving Barron Trump continued to ripple across social media. By evening, the video had garnered millions of views and thousands of comments. People from all walks of life were weighing in, some applauding Barron's poise, others criticizing the stranger for confronting him so publicly. The debate became a microcosm of the larger societal divide that had long characterized his father's political career. Barron, however, remained unaware of the frenzy his composed reply had sparked. After leaving the Café, he walked several blocks to his favorite bookstore. The familiar scent of paper and ink was a welcome refuge from the confrontation he had just endured. He wandered the aisles, his fingers tracing the spines of books as he let his mind relax. The owner of the bookstore, an older man named Mr. Hensley, greeted Barron warmly as he always did. "Good to see you, young man. Find anything interesting today?" Barron smiled. "Not yet, but I'm looking." Mr. Hensley chuckled. "Take your time. Let me know if you need a recommendation." Barron's calm exterior belied the thoughts swirling in his mind. Despite his reserved nature, he couldn't ignore the lingering emotions from the Café. The stranger's anger wasn't new to him. He had faced similar reactions before, but this time felt different. It wasn't just about his family's name. It felt personal. Meanwhile, back at Trump Tower, the video had reached the attention of key figures within the Trump organization. Ivanka and Eric Trump watched the clip together, their expressions a mix of pride and concern. "He handled it well," Ivanka said, her tone thoughtful. "But this kind of attention isn't easy for him. He's always preferred staying out of the spotlight." Eric nodded. "That's true. But maybe this is a moment for people to see who Barron really is. He's not just our brother. He's his own person. This could help him carve out his own identity." Ivanka smiled slightly. "You might be right. Still, we should check in with him. I'll give him a call later tonight." Back at the bookstore, Barron found a new title that piqued his interest, a collection of essays on philosophy and ethics. He made his purchase and thanked Mr. Hensley before stepping back into the brisk evening air. As he walked toward the subway station, his phone buzzed with a call. It was Ivanka. "Hey, Barron," she said warmly when he answered. "How are you?" "I'm fine," he replied, his tone measured. "What's up?" "I just saw the video from the Café," Ivanka said. "You handled yourself really well. I'm proud of you." Barron sighed. "Thanks. It wasn't exactly a fun experience, but I guess it's part of the deal." "It is," Ivanka agreed. "But remember, you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." It's okay to set boundaries and take time for yourself. Barron appreciated her words but felt conflicted. Sometimes I wonder if people will ever see me as just me, he admitted. Not as my father's son, but as my own person. Ivanka's voice softened. They will, Barron. Moments like today show the kind of person you are, calm, thoughtful, and mature beyond your years. That speaks louder than any name ever could. As the call ended, Barron felt a small measure of reassurance. He knew his sister was right, but the journey to individuality still felt like a daunting road ahead. The next morning, Barron's name dominated headlines. News anchors and commentators dissected the Café incident, analyzing every word and gesture. Some praised his composure, while others questioned whether he should have spoken out more forcefully. Barron's social media accounts, usually quiet, were inundated with messages, some supportive, others critical. One message, however, stood out. It was a private note from a young woman named Emily, who introduced herself as a college student majoring in political science. "Hi, Barron," the message began. "I saw the video from the Café, and I just wanted to say how much I admire the way you handled yourself. As someone who struggled to stay calm in tough situations, your response really inspired me. Thank you for showing that kindness and patience can still make an impact." Barron read the message several times, a faint smile forming on his lips. It was a reminder that even in the chaos, his actions could resonate with others in meaningful ways. As the week progressed, Barron's life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be. He continued his studies, spent time with friends, and maintained his routine of visiting the bookstore and cafe. But the experience at the cafe stayed with him, prompting deeper reflection about who he was and what kind of future he wanted to build for himself. One afternoon, as he sat in the park reading his philosophy book, an older gentleman approached him. The man carried a leather-bound journal and wore a weathered smile. "Excuse me," the man said. "I don't mean to bother you, but are you Barron Trump?" Barron nodded, wary but polite. "Yes, that's me." The man extended a hand. "My name is Richard. I saw the video from the Café, and I just wanted to say how much I respect the way you handled yourself. It's not easy to stay composed in the face of anger, especially when it's directed at you." "Thank you, Richard," Barron replied, shaking his hand. "I appreciate that." Richard hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You know, I've spent years writing about leadership and ethics, and I think you've got the makings of a great leader. The world needs more people who can listen and respond with grace." Barron was taken aback by the compliment, but managed a modest smile. "That's kind of you to say. I'm still figuring things out, but I'll keep that in mind." The two chatted briefly before Richard wished Barron well and departed. As Barron watched him leave, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps his path wasn't as uncertain as it seemed. Later that evening, Barron shared the encounter with his mother, Melania, over dinner. She listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "You have a gift, Barron," she said. "Your ability to stay calm and see the bigger picture is something not everyone has. Use it wisely." Her words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Barron realized that while he couldn't control how others perceived him, he could control how he responded. And perhaps, in doing so, he could shape a legacy of his own, one built on resilience, kindness, and thoughtful action. The days following Barron Trump's Café encounter had been both reflective and transformative. The incident had sparked a wave of conversations, not just in the media, but also within Barron himself. He had spent years living in the shadow of his father's public persona, but this moment had thrust him into a spotlight he couldn't avoid. Instead of retreating, Barron decided it was time to confront the challenges head-on and take control of his narrative. As news of the incident continued to spread, Barron's life became busier. Messages flooded his inbox, ranging from words of encouragement to harsh criticisms. While he tried to tune out the negativity, the supportive messages left a profound impact. One in particular caught his attention, an invitation to speak at a youth leadership conference. The conference, hosted by a nonprofit organization focused on empowering young adults, sought to address topics like resilience, public service, and leadership in challenging times. The email explained that Barron's response at the cafe had resonated with many, and the organizers believed his perspective would inspire others. Barron hesitated initially, unsure if he was ready to share his thoughts on such a public platform. But after discussing it with his mother and siblings, he decided to accept the invitation. The conference was held in Washington, D.C., in a modern auditorium filled with hundreds of young attendees eager to learn and engage. As Barron arrived backstage, he felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. He had spent weeks preparing his speech, crafting it to reflect not only his experiences, but also the lessons he had learned about staying grounded in the face of adversity. When his name was announced, the room erupted in applause. Barron walked onto the stage, his tall frame and composed demeanor commanding attention. He adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Good afternoon," he started, his voice steady. "My name is Barron Trump, and I'm here today not because I have all the answers, but because I believe in the power of conversation and understanding." He paused, scanning the room before continuing. "A few weeks ago, I had an experience that reminded me of how divided we can sometimes feel. A stranger approached me in a cafe, frustrated and angry, and he directed those feelings at me. In that moment, I had a choice: to respond with anger or to listen and try to understand." Barron went on to share how the encounter had taught him the value of empathy and patience. We live in a world where it's easy to react, to let our emotions take over and escalate conflict. But what if we chose a different path? What if we paused, listened, and sought common ground? It's not always easy, but it's necessary if we want to move forward together. The audience listened intently, many nodding in agreement. Barron concluded his speech with a message of hope. We're all capable of building bridges instead of walls. It starts with small actions, a kind word, an open mind, a willingness to engage. Together, we can create a future where understanding triumphs over division. As he stepped off the stage, the applause was thunderous. Barron felt a sense of relief and pride. He had shared his truth, and the response reassured him that his voice mattered. After the event, Barron was approached by several attendees who wanted to thank him for his speech. Among them was a young man named Ethan, who shared his own struggles with navigating a polarized world. "Your story really hit home for me," Ethan said. "I've always felt caught between different perspectives in my family, and it's hard to know how to respond. Hearing you talk about empathy made me realize it's okay to take a step back and listen." Barron smiled. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it. The more we listen, the more we understand. And understanding is the first step toward progress." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thanks, Barron. I'm going to try to do that more." The interaction left Barron feeling even more determined to continue his journey of growth and advocacy. He realized that his experiences, both the challenges and the triumphs, could serve as a source of inspiration for others. Back in New York, Barron's life began to take on a new rhythm. He balanced his studies with speaking engagements and continued to frequent his favorite cafe and bookstore. While he cherished his moments of solitude, he also embraced the opportunities to connect with people and share his perspective. One day, as he sat at the cafe reviewing notes for an upcoming event, a familiar face approached him. It was the older woman who had spoken up during the cafe incident. "Barron," she said warmly, "I don't know if you remember me, but I was here the day that man confronted you." Barron nodded, smiling. "Of course, I remember. Your kindness meant a lot to me that day." The woman, whose name was Margaret, took a seat across from him. "I've been following your journey since then," she said. "You've handled everything with such grace. It gives me hope to see someone your age leading with integrity." "Thank you, Margaret," Barron replied. "That means a lot coming from you. Your words that day reminded me to stay grounded." They talked for a while, sharing stories and reflections. Margaret's wisdom and Barron's optimism made for a lively and enriching conversation. By the time they parted ways, Barron felt even more inspired to continue making a difference. As the months went by, Barron's reputation as a thoughtful and compassionate young leader grew. He was invited to participate in panels, collaborate on community initiatives, and even contribute to a book on youth leadership. While he remained humble about his accomplishments, he recognized the unique platform he had been given and used it to amplify messages of unity and understanding. His family watched his journey with pride. Melania often reminded him to stay true to himself, while Donald Trump, despite his larger-than-life personality, expressed admiration for Barron's quiet strength. "You've got something special, son," Trump said during one of their conversations. "The ability to listen and lead without needing to shout. That's a rare gift. Use it wisely." Barron took his father's words to heart. He knew his path wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Café incident had been a turning point, not just in how others saw him, but in how he saw himself. It had taught him that true strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about staying calm, empathetic, and true to one's values. As Barron stood on the balcony of his family's New York home one evening, looking out over the city lights, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey he was on was far from over, but he knew he was heading in the right direction. And for the first time, he felt confident that he could create a legacy of his own, one built on understanding, resilience, and hope.